Hi everybody, today I'm going to read you one of my favourite stories. It's called The Stranger by Chris Van Allsburg, and it's a story about a stranger, believe it or not. But this stranger is a very special stranger, and as I read it to you, I want you to be thinking, who is this stranger? See if you can work it out. Buzz, you're going to give it a go. Woody, you're going to give it a go. Buzz and Woody were two of Te Ake's favourite friends when he was little. So this is The Stranger by Chris Van Allsburg. If we have a look at the first picture, you can get an idea of what time of year it was. It was the time of year that Farmer Bailey liked best, when summer turned to fall. He whistled as he drove along. A cool breeze blew across his face through the truck's open window. Then it happened. There was a loud thump. Mr. Bailey jammed on his brakes. Oh no, he thought. I've hit a deer. But it wasn't a deer. Have a look. Look at who it was. It wasn't a deer that the farmer found lying in the road. It was a man. Mr. Bailey knelt down beside the still figure, fearing the worst. Then suddenly the man opened his eyes. He looked up with terror and he jumped to his feet. He tried to run off, but he lost his balance and fell down. He got up again, but this time the farmer took his arm and helped him into the truck. Mr. Bailey drove home. He helped the stranger inside, and Mrs. Bailey made the stranger comfortable on the sofa in the lounge. Katie, their daughter, peeked into the room. The man on the sofa was dressed in odd, rough leather clothing. She heard her father whisper, "He must be some kind of hermit." A hermit's someone who lives all by themselves. The sort of fellow who lives alone in the woods. The stranger didn't seem to understand the questions that Mr. Bailey asked him. "I don't think," said Mr. Bailey, "I don't think he knows how to talk." Mr. Bailey called the doctor, who came and listened to the stranger's heart. He felt his bones, he looked in his eyes, and he took his temperature. He decided the man had lost his memory. There was a bump on the back of his head. In a few days, the doctor said, he should remember who he is and where he's from. Mr. Bailey stopped the doctor as he left the house. He'd forgotten his thermometer. "Oh, you can throw that away," said the doctor. "It's broken. The mercury is stuck at the bottom." Mr. Bailey let the stranger wear some clean clothes. The fellow seemed confused about buttonholes and buttons, like he'd never seen them before. In the evening, he joined the Baileys for dinner. The steam that rose from the hot food, fascinated him. He watched Katy take a spoonful of soup and blow gently on it. So then he did exactly the same. Mrs. Bailey shivered. "Oh," she said, "there's a draught in here tonight." Here he is, look. He's never seen soup before. Well, he's never seen steam before, maybe. The next morning, Katy watched the stranger from her bedroom window. He walked across the yard towards 2 rabbits. Instead of running off into the woods, the rabbits hopped towards him. He picked one of them up and stroked his ears, then set it back down. The rabbits hopped away, then stopped and looked back, as if they expected the stranger to follow them. When Katy's father went into the fields that day, the stranger shyly tagged along. Mr. Bailey gave him a pitchfork, and with a bit of practice he learned to use it well. They worked hard. Every now and again, Mr. Bailey would have to stop and have a rest. But the stranger never even tired. In fact, he didn't even sweat. So he's worked hard all day, using a pitchfork to lift up those stooks of hay onto the big wagon, and he hasn't even broken a sweat. That evening, Katy sat with the stranger, watching the setting sun. High above them, a flock of geese in perfect V formation flew south on the trip that they made every autumn. The stranger could not take his eyes off the birds. He stared at them like a man who was hypnotized. Two weeks passed, and the stranger could not remember still who he was. But the Baileys didn't mind. They liked having the stranger around. He'd become one of the family. Day by day, he'd grown less shy. "He seems really happy to be around us," Mr. Bailey said to his wife. "It's hard to believe that he could be a hermit." Another week passed. Farmer Bailey could not help noticing how peculiar the weather had been. Not long ago it had seemed that autumn was just around the corner, but now it still felt like summer, as if the seasons couldn't change. The warm days made the pumpkins grow larger than ever. The leaves on the trees were as green as they had been 3 weeks before. Look at those pumpkins. My goodness. One day, the stranger climbed the highest hill on the Bailey farm. He looked out to the north, and he saw a puzzling sight. The trees in the distance were bright red and orange, but the trees to the south, like those round the Baileys, were nothing but shades of green. They seemed so drab, even ugly to the stranger. It would be much better, he thought, if all the trees could be red and orange. The stranger's feelings grew stronger the next day. He couldn't look at green tree leaves without feeling that there was something terribly wrong. The more he thought about it, the more upset he became, until finally he could think of nothing else. He ran to a tree and he pulled off a leaf. He held it in his trembling hand, and without thinking, he blew on it. At dinner that evening, the stranger appeared, dressed in his old leather clothes. By the tears in his eyes, the Baileys could tell that their friend had decided it was time to leave. He hugged them all once, then he ran to the door. The Baileys hurried outside to wave goodbye, but the stranger had already disappeared. The air had turned cold, and the leaves on the trees were no longer green. Every autumn, since the stranger's visit, the same thing happens at the Bailey farm. The trees that surround the Bailey farm stay green for a week longer than all the other trees to the north. Then, overnight, they change their colour to the brightest of any of the trees all around. And etched into the frost on the farmhouse windows are the words that say simply, "See you next autumn." I wonder who you think that stranger is. So he wore leather clothes. He didn't talk. He had never seen steam. He didn't know about buttons and buttonholes. He never sweated. He could work very hard. He was kind. The animals loved him. When he blew on things, it got very cold. And when he blew on the leaf, it changed colour. And he comes back every year at the start of autumn. I wonder if you can work out who he is. Good luck. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I think Buzz and Woody certainly did. And we'll have another story for you soon. Bye for now.